And closing is the act of, once you go under contract, it's all the legal activities that happen between your signature on that contract and the recording of the deed and disbursement of funds.
I don't even know I'm married to you. Who am I married to?
You're like, you do things other than just look at signatures on paperwork? Hey everybody, welcome back to the North Carolina Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber. I am your host. I'm a real estate attorney at Thomas & Weber in Mooresville, North Carolina. We do closings all around Lake Norman, but I do North Carolina real estate law, so that's what we talk about. Today's topic, this topic is something that you've lived the life with me, so you probably know what this is.
I forgot the topic, so.
It is, what does a real estate attorney do during the closing process?
Gotcha.
And I'm really liking this segment of what does Ryan think, so that I can then have something to talk about to correct all the ways you're going to go off the rails. So from your perspective, what does a real estate attorney do during the closing process? And this is actually a good exercise because agents, imagine Ryan is your client, because this is probably what they think too. In fact, they may know even less. He's married to a real estate lawyer. So if you hear him talking, you're like, wow, that's not it.
Oh, he's smart.
Imagine what your first-time home buyers think. So I think this is a great exercise.
When would you like me to begin?
What do you define the closing process as?
I actually, if I'm a normal person, not this intelligent, hunky man sitting over here, I'm thinking the closing process when I sit down and sign my papers.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And you explain to them what the papers say. But I know you do way more than that. But in my little tiny brain, you go in there, you put on a show, you wheel and deal, you make these people feel great. You have a celebration.
I tell them to give their agents referrals.
And you look at every little signature line and make sure it's signed. And that's all I think that a real estate attorney does.
That's interesting because I know
you do more.
I do all of those things, but if we're talking about the act that you just described as settlement, and the reason nobody calls it that is because people don't use the contract terms. We're getting really specific about what the contract says. What you were just describing is settlement, which is where everybody gets together, signs the paperwork.
That's a closing to me.
And closing is the act of, once you go under contract, it's all the legal activities that happen between your signature on that contract and the recording of the deed and disbursement of funds. So I
don't even know I'm married to you. Who am I married to?
You're like, you do things other than just look at signatures on paperwork? Whoa. Starting with title search. People might say, oh, the attorney is expensive for all that they do. I only spent 45 minutes with the attorney. Well, I spent way more time than that on making sure that you got clear title, which is the gold standard, what the buyer has to get at closing, which is clear title to the property with no judgments, no liens, no encumbrances, nothing that would impair their ownership. And that starts from the moment we get the contract, which is verifying, one, does the seller actually own what they are trying to sell to you? And two, do they have anything filed against the property, whether by them or some other person, that would make it less attractive or impair your ownership? So have they given away some rights? Do you have the right to even build on it if you want to? There's so many things that go into determining whether you have good title. Then after that, you got to make sure that all of the seller's debt obligations are paid off so that they don't attach to the property and go along with the buyer.
There's some things that oh man, this is going off the rails. I really have to be involved. I'm having to be a real lawyer, you know.
Disagreements between the parties about whether the seller misrepresented things, or say a buyer wants to back out after due diligence has expired, but they think they should be entitled to something.
Because that's when I feel like people and agents are like, I had a good lawyer. It's when you had to step in and easements. Do extra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or I think about in almost every transaction we represent the buyer, but say your buyer wants to close at a different attorney's office and you have a relationship with us and want to work with us, we will represent you separately. will do your seller representation. So I had a closing a couple months ago. I can't mention details because a lot of people know about this house. It's kind of well known in its subdivision, where the buyer didn't close on time and didn't have a good reason. The contract gives you potential to delay closing for up to 7 days if it's not possible to close, but there was not an impossibility, and that led to quite a bit of conflict. So I spent, 25, 30 hours of legal time in consulting with the clients, drafting letters, going back and forth with attorneys. We don't bill by the hour, so.
Does that make you mad? Does that really grind your gears?
No, because nobody knew going into it that it was going to turn into that. Sure, would I have loved to, in a case like that, bill by the hour and just stack bills? There's an element of people making money in capitalism.
To be here at work. If they would, people would let you bill by the hour, I'd probably be hanging out somewhere.
But the reason why I don't get hung up on that is that these people trusted our firm to represent them in a situation where the buyer had chosen another attorney, and we were in their corner the whole way and helped them get it resolved. So sometimes that's the risk you take of doing flat fees, is that the scope might exceed what you originally engaged for. But these are people that I feel like we did a good job, and them and their agent will remember that, and that will provide referrals or keep them coming back. So yeah, sometimes things do go off the rails. And
I think that's a good information. The actual closing process is longer than most people think, and your fee is very little, because if you were just charging your normal hourly rate,
it would be very big. Yeah, I am kind of mind blown that even after entering my 7th year of practicing law, that's what you thought the closing was, just the appointment. Learn something new.
That's what I would have called the closing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Once again, this has been another episode of the North Carolina Real Estate Show with our very special guest, Ryan Weber. We'll see if he earns another guest spot on future episodes.
It's up to you, people.
But it's been a good run, regardless of what happens after this. I'm going to try to get the Marketing Dude 44, but if not, I'll give you a call.
Hey, 4 in a row. It's better than LeBron ever did.
All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you on the next episode.